Hi everyone, this is Matt. Welcome back to Touchgrass Gardening. Today we're going to be talking about citrus, which is one of my favorite trees because it checks all of my boxes for what I think about when I'm thinking about the perfect tree, which is that it's hardy, it's evergreen, it provides fruit, and I don't need to protect it in the summer or the winter. So as you can see behind me, we have an Arizona sweet orange. I have 3 of these in my yard. They're actually mature trees at this point, so they're about 15 years old, and they were taken from a citrus plantation by the previous owner of our house and then put into our yard, and they've done amazing. For this type of tree in particular, it's great for juicing, and what we love about these oranges is you can pick them anytime between about Christmas and the middle of March. So you have almost 3 months of time where you can come out to your backyard and juice oranges at any point, which is amazing because there's hundreds of oranges on each and every tree. And so we just have unlimited orange juice for 3 months out of the year, and fresh squeezed orange juice tastes much better than what you can get in the store. So this is the Arizona sweet orange, highly recommended variety. It's not one you see very often, but here in Arizona is one that is a bit more common because it grows so well. Now, I want to show you some of the other citrus trees in my yard as well. And again, as I started to develop the yard myself, I really thought about which trees would provide me the most happiness and the least amount of work. And that's what citrus really does because of all the reasons that I listed at the beginning. So let's think about what other citruses are in the family. So for us, we really love pomelos, which are big citruses. They're actually the first citrus, and all the other citruses after them are variants of pomelos and crossbreeds from pomelo. So this is a Chandler pomelo. It's a red pomelo, one of the more common ones that you see at the store. And I just put this in the ground last year. And the interesting thing about this tree is I didn't protect it in our summer, which got to 120 degrees, and I haven't protected it in our winter, which 2 days ago just got down to 25 degrees Fahrenheit. So this is a small tree, and it doesn't need any protection. If you just keep it watered, have a bit of mulch around it, it is a very hardy tree. Pomelo is a generally hardier version of citrus, but most citrus, they don't need a lot of protection or love to survive and do well. And so that's really why I love it. And you can see from this tree, it's a small tree and it's able to do all that. So the next one that I wanted to show you is in Oro Blanco. There's only one fruit on this tree that's really doing that well this year. There were a bunch of small fruits on the tree, and I got greedy in trying to leave too many fruits on the tree. And I should have thinned it out earlier. And what ended up happening is half of them started dying off, and then the other half just remained very small. So I should have actually taken some of these smaller fruits off when I first saw them, so that I can enable the tree to push the energy to just a few of the fruits because it's still a small tree. And this Oro Blanco provides pretty large fruits because it's a crossbreed between pomelo and a white grapefruit. And so it's a large fruit, a bit larger than a grapefruit, and is really quite delicious if you've never tried it. It's called an Oro Blanco. It's kind of like a white pomelo, so one of my favorite type of citruses. And we just put this tree in the ground about 2 years ago now, I think, and it's grown about a foot. Citrus aren't the fastest growers, but again, you don't have to do much with it and it'll just grow. And so here's the largest citrus tree that we have in our yard. The previous owner called it a Nova mandarin orange, but I have my doubts about that being true. And it does peel really well, like a mandarin orange does, but it also has, a bump on the top of it, like, maybe like a tangelo or something else in the citrus family that has a large bump. You can probably see it better on a few of these other that are on the tree here. You can see like this bump on the top of the citrus. So for those of you who are out there that have this type of citrus tree at home, I'd love for you to let me know what you think this is. It tastes like a mandarin. It has a bit sour and sweet. So it's delicious fruit. We love it. And there's hundreds of fruit on there. It's also pretty good for juicing. But I don't think it's a mandarin because it has this bump, and I've never really seen mandarins with this bump before. So let me know what you think it is. But this is the largest tree on our property in terms of citrus, and it's really beautiful. All I do with these established trees is just fertilize 3 times a year. So there's 3 holidays that you fertilize on. It's Valentine's Day, Labor Day, and Veterans Day, which are the 3 holidays that you remember to fertilize your trees on. And with established trees like this, I used to overthink it, where I would dig holes around the drip line, the outer line of where your foliage is for your trees, and I would dig holes and put chemical fertilizer in there, and I would think like that's the best way to get it into the roots, and I didn't really see that big of a difference. So now I just take a lazier approach. I go out here and I just throw it around the drip line, have my bag of fertilizer with me, and just throw it around, and then I water it in with the hose and walk away, and this is the result. So I think often in gardening we can overthink things, and often the simplest approach is usually the best. So for me, I don't think that you need to overthink it when you're fertilizing your citrus, especially with these established trees, and I'll talk a little bit more about the less established trees in my yard as we go to another section of the yard. So the 2 newest additions to my yard in terms of citrus are 2 pomelos. And this is a Valentine pomelo. And I also have a Tahitian pomelo. So what I found over the past couple of years is our family eats a lot of pomelo that we order online from an Asian grocery store. But I'd like to be able to just come into my backyard and pick them myself. And again, pomelo is the largest citrus fruit, so it's going to take time for this tree to get big enough to produce fruit and hold on to the fruit. But I'm starting now. This is the biggest tree I could find in these 2 pomelo varieties that I did research on and came to the conclusion that they were the best tasting. So again, this is the Valentine pomelo, and then I also have a Tahitian pomelo over here. So 2 small citruses that have been in the ground for, I'd say, 4 or 5 months. Doing well, survived summer without any protection. Small trees, but they'll get bigger in time. They'll be big trees. And so, I wanted more of those pomelos in my yard. In particular, these pomelos are interesting because the Valentine pomelo gets its name from having a heart shape of the flesh inside of it. And then the Tahitian pomelo is more of a green type of interior flesh. So a little bit of variance in terms of pomelo in contrast with the Chandler red pomelo that I showed you earlier in the video, which was next to my orange trees. So these are 2 pomelos that you should consider as well. So this is my Lisbon lemon tree, and it's the most prolific tree in my yard, meaning it grows more fruit than any other tree. And we just have way too many lemons every year. So there's hundreds of lemons on this tree, and it's all throughout. It's just like clusters of lemons, and it's grown to be 25 feet wide and 15 feet tall. It's somewhat used as a privacy hedge in the back of my yard, and it's a wonderful tree because I don't do hardly anything with it. I just simply fertilize the 3 holidays, as I said, as you should do with the oranges. So this tree has just been a wonderful addition to the yard. I think one advice I would make is that if you're thinking about lemons, only plant 1 tree because you're not going to need more than 1. There's really not that many uses for lemons. And if you have a tree that has hundreds of fruits on it, you're probably not going to need more than 1 tree. Now this is an older tree. It's 15, 20 years old. So it's a little bit different situation than people thinking about planting a new tree. But at 5 years old, you're going to have too many lemons. And so I like the aesthetics of this tree, and that's why I keep it big. But as I continue to develop more of this privacy hedge in my backyard, I'm probably going to cut it back slightly. But again, this is the versatility of citrus, is you can use it as a privacy hedge, still have fruit, and not have to deal with the summer or the winter in terms of maintenance. So that's again why I think citrus is just a wonderful tree and a great addition to your backyard. So again, this is Lisbon lemon, and it is a prolific, wonderful tree to plant. So now we're in the sitting area of my backyard where oftentimes we just like to come out in the morning and drink coffee together, whatever it is. It's just a nice area because it's fairly well shaded. And this used to all just be landscape rock. And what I decided to do is to ring it with smaller citrus, which in this case are kumquats and a Buddha hand citrus. So this is a Fukushu kumquat. It was bought from Home Depot, but it's done decent in terms of that it looks good now, but about a year ago it dropped all of its leaves and I thought it was going to die. And I think the main reason that that happened is I over-fertilized it. So if you're starting out with a citrus, what you really want to avoid is giving it too much fertilizer during those 3 holidays that I mentioned, but just give it a very sparing amount of fertilizer so that you don't kill your tree. And these kumquats are actually a little bit more sensitive, along with the Buddha's hand, are more sensitive than your orange trees or your pomelo trees, the big citrus trees. And these ones, they don't get as big as the other orange and pomelo trees either. So they're smaller trees, slightly more sensitive, but at the same time, I don't cold or heat protect this tree. So it's still pretty hardy in comparison to a lot of other fruit trees I have in my yard, like a lychee or a longan, something like that. So I still love these in this area because of how versatile they are, how good they look in terms of being evergreen, and then in terms of how they're hardy and easy to take care of. So you can see this Buddha's hand here. I planted it just 2 months ago. It already has some new growth coming in, and it has 1 fruit on it. So I wasn't planning on planting one of these, but it was $24.99 at Costco, and I thought that's a steal of a deal because if you go to a nursery, these are slightly more rare trees, and it can be up to $100 for even a 2 or 3 foot tree, as I've often seen around here. So I thought this was a nice tree to have. This will probably grow a little bit bigger than the kumquats, but I put it in the middle, and I can kind of trim this as it goes so that there's almost like a wall of green as we're sitting in this area behind us. And then eventually it'll look a lot more lush than it does right now where there's all this landscape rock. And then this is the last kumquat that I have in this row here. This is a Nagami kumquat. So it's got a fair bit of fruit. I planted it earlier this year. It's done super well. It's a type that is a bit more upright in terms of the Fukushu was more bushy. I like this look. I think it's beautiful. Has a lot of fruit. I haven't tried this variety yet, whereas I have tried the Fukushu. This one, this Nagami, I've heard that it's good, and I'm looking forward to trying the fruit later this year. But I should say that the Fukushu kumquat that we saw earlier, the fruits are a little bit sour, and so you want to think about maybe making a jelly or a jam with it. But at the same time, some people might like them, like my daughter just will come up and eat it straight. So it depends on your tastes. I will say that the last kumquat that I'll show you, which is right over here, this variety of kumquat is called Meiwa, and it's sweet. So this is the most delicious variety of kumquat. If you're thinking about which one should I plant in my yard if I only have space for one, or I only want to plant one kumquat, I would highly recommend you go with Meiwa, just because the taste is so much better. Even I, who prefers things that are sweeter, I can just pick this off the tree and eat it straight. So I think Meiwa is the best variety of kumquat. It's a little bit lanky, but I also don't have any support for it right now, so it's able to hold itself up. even though it is lanky and it does move in the wind a bit, as you can see. It is pretty windy today, and that's actually a good example for how you can see that a tree like this, even though it is skinny, lanky, it's holding itself up and it doesn't have a support stick. It did for about the first 6 months, but I took that away because I really want to let my trees strengthen on their own, particularly when it's not super windy, and then they can withstand the wind later like it is now today. So, this tree has done well here. It's been in the ground maybe a year and a half, and we had fruits last year. This year it doesn't have fruits. I'm not exactly sure why. I think it struggled a bit in the summer because it's in a sunnier spot. You can see it's right next to this Arizona sweet orange. So this is like a almost full sun area right next to blocks and concrete. So this just gets blasted with sun, and I didn't protect it at all from the elements this past summer, and I think it's got a little bit beat up. Well, actually there is one I didn't even notice right here. So there's one kumquat growing right here, and there's a small one right next to it that's also coming in. So I guess we will have a little bit of fruit. Oh, there's another one here. I guess I should have looked closer at my tree. So once you get closer to your trees, you realize that there might be fruit on there. And so, yeah, that's actually exciting. So Meiwa kumquat, the most delicious variety and the one I enjoy. There's 2 more Arizona sweet oranges here and here. So these are slightly younger trees than the ones that I showed you in my backyard earlier. And you can see some of the variance in size, where those other trees were 20, 25 feet tall, where these ones are 8 or 9 feet tall. And you can see over time they do get bigger, but the amount of fruit that's on them is just as good a quality. So from a few years old, most citrus trees are going to give you super high quality fruit. So I think that you can look forward to having fruit very quickly with citrus, as opposed to some other fruit trees do take longer, particularly tropical trees. And then one last thing that I wanted to talk about before going, and this is my cocktail tree, which is a lemon and key lime. So it's a split, and this is one of my favorite trees because it overhangs our sitting area, and it's just a unique tree because it has 2 varieties of citrus on it. And it's a mature tree, it's done super well. But I will say that we got a little bit of damage on this tree this year, and if you come over here, I'll show you. So you can walk under this archway where the citrus overhangs all of it. I really love this trellis and archway where you can just walk under all these lemons, and then on the other side you're walking under key limes. And this tree has done very well, but there was one small mistake that I made this past summer, and that was not realizing that when I trimmed this back a little bit to give more room to the raised beds, it actually exposed the bark to too much sun. And one thing you should know about citrus is that you'll often see the bark painted white, and I'll need to repaint this in the spring. But for most citruses in super hot climates, you're going to want to paint the bark, and you can find white bark paint at any hardware store or online. And the reason is that citrus actually loves sun, but their bark can burn, and so that will damage the tree if you let the bark burn. Whereas you can see, like, the sun is coming from the west for most of the day, and it just blasted this area of the tree because the top, which had normally overhanged a bit more, was now trimmed away. And then you can see that there's 4 big trunks here. These 3 in the back, no damage. I haven't painted those because it's such a mature tree and it wasn't painted when we moved into the house. But this one does have that damage. So that is one thing to consider with your citrus trees, is you'll want to paint the trunk, especially when it's young. And you should take a look earlier at the kumquat trees. I painted the one over there that you can see that's in the ground, a white paint. And then one last thing I wanted to note before going is people often ask about citrus, you know, should I be trimming the bottoms of it? And I'll show you what I mean by that. So there's all these suckers that come up from the bottom of citrus trees, and you don't want these because they're actually coming from the rootstock. So you're gonna either pull it away or cut it and just take it off, because this is actually a different fruit than what is coming from the top of your tree, because these citrus trees are all grafted. And there's always gonna be suckers growing up from the graft, but you wanna cut those away and give that strength and energy to the rest of your tree, which is the fruit that you're gonna wanna eat. So people often ask, do I cut these away? Citrus want to be more of like a bush, but most people want a tree. And so I cut away these suckers, and generally it helps the tree. So that was my tour of the citrus in our yard. I hope you enjoyed it, and you come back to see how these citrus trees develop over the year. So thanks for watching. If you like this video or you have any comments on citrus trees in your yard, please let me know, and I'll see you next time.